Everyone in the courthouse knew her name, but very few noticed her face because she never tried to stand out. Never spoke too loud, never stayed in the middle of attention. She was always the quiet one, moving softly like a shadow through the long marble halls, carrying files and papers and cups of coffee. Her name was Mara Ellis, and her silence had become part of the building itself, like an old echo that never leaves. She worked for Judge Roland Gray, a man everyone feared and respected at the same time. His voice could cut through the air like a blade, and his eyes were cold as winter glass. He demanded perfection from everyone, but especially from Mara, because she was always there, always calm, never arguing, never showing anger or emotion. The perfect clerk for a man who lived on control. Every morning Mara arrived before sunrise when the halls were empty, and the air smelled of old paper and dust. She lined up the judge's documents, arranged his files by number, and placed his black coffee exactly 3 inches from the edge of the desk. She did everything with quiet precision, her hands never shaking, her expression blank and distant. No one ever thought about what went on behind those calm brown eyes. That morning began like all the others until her phone vibrated inside her small purse. She almost ignored it because no one ever called her. But something inside told her to look. On the screen was a single message made of only a few words, strange and cold. Call sign Echo 47, do not ignore. Her hand trembled slightly. She stared at the words as if they were ghosts from another life. Because they were, the courtroom was already filling with people. Lawyers whispering, guards standing stiff, reporters waiting near the back. Judge Gray entered with his usual heavy step, and the crowd went silent. His robe swayed like a black curtain as he took his seat. His eyes flicked toward Mara for half a second and then back to his notes. She bowed her head and started typing, trying to pretend nothing was wrong. But her heart was beating too fast to ignore Echo 47. She whispered to herself in her mind again and again. 10 years ago, that call sign had meant something terrible and unforgettable. It was connected to the night her brother disappeared. A night she buried deep in her memory because remembering hurt too much. She had told herself it was over, that the past had closed its doors forever. But now it was knocking again, louder than ever during the hearing. She could barely hear the words being spoken. The lawyers were arguing about a case of fraud. The judge was speaking in his cold, steady tone, but Mara felt far away. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, but her eyes were fixed on the glowing screen of her phone hidden under the desk. The message was still there, simple and powerful, like a whisper from the dead when the session ended. Judge Gray called her into his office as usual. The walls were tall and lined with shelves full of old law books, the air heavy with the smell of paper and ink. He didn't look up when she entered. He only said in his sharp voice, "You seem distracted." "Miss Ellis," and she nodded quietly, saying, "I'm fine." "Your Honor." Even though she wasn't, he glanced at her for a moment, studying her face like he could see every secret hiding under her skin. Then he gave a small nod and went back to his files. She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, he said something that made her freeze. "Don't let ghosts follow you into my courtroom." His tone was casual, but his eyes stayed cold and knowing. She left the office with her heart pounding, wondering what he meant, wondering if he somehow knew outside. Rain began to fall, soft at first and then heavy. She walked down the courthouse steps with her umbrella shaking in her hand, her mind racing through old memories she had tried to forget. The night her brother left for a secret mission, the promise he made to come back, the call that never came, and the single word she heard before the line went dead. Echo. She reached her small apartment and sat on the couch staring at the message again. The world outside was dark and silent except for the rain tapping on the window. Her reflection looked pale and tired in the glass. She felt like she was staring at a stranger, the quiet woman she had become after years of silence. But now her silence was breaking piece by piece. She opened a drawer and pulled out an old wooden box. Inside were faded photographs, a folded letter, and a military badge with a number scratched on the back. 47. She traced the number with her finger, her eyes filling with tears she didn't let fall. The badge was all she had left of her brother. She had kept it hidden even from herself, pretending it was just a memory, but it wasn't. It was a warning. The message wasn't random. It wasn't a mistake. It was a call, a signal, a reminder that the past was alive and waiting. She didn't know who sent it or why it came now, but she knew this. The quiet days were ending, and her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. As thunder rolled outside, Mara turned off the lights and sat in the dark, holding the phone tight in her hand, her breath shallow and uneven. Somewhere deep inside she felt it, The storm was coming, and she was standing right in the middle of it. The courthouse stood quiet after dark, long shadows stretching across the empty hallways like dark rivers. The sound of rain still whispered outside as Mara Ellis finished her work alone. The ticking clock on the wall echoed with every second that passed. Each tick sounded louder than the last, and her heart felt like it was trying to match the rhythm. Fast and uneven, Judge Roland Gray had already left for a meeting downtown. Or at least that was what he said. His office door was closed, but the faint red light on his recorder was still blinking on the table. A small light that should have been off. Mara noticed it as she passed by, and something inside her told her to check. A quiet voice in her head whispered that something was wrong, that this night was not like the others. She hesitated at the doorway, her hands shaking just slightly. She had never touched the judge's private things before. She always followed the rules. She lived by them, but the message on her phone from earlier wouldn't leave her mind. Call sign Echo 47, do not ignore. Those words felt like a key unlocking something buried deep, and now that red light felt like a door she needed to open. She stepped into the office and stood in front of the recorder. The air in the room was cold and heavy. The judge's chair looked like a dark throne watching her. She pressed play with trembling fingers. The machine clicked softly and then a voice filled the room. The judge's voice, calm, sharp, full of control. But this time there was something else in it. A tone she had never heard before. Echo 47 has been reactivated, he said slowly, his voice low. The subject doesn't remember yet. Make sure she stays that way. We can't afford another mistake. Mara froze, her hand covering her mouth. She could hear her own heart pounding in her ears. He was talking about her. He was calling her the subject. Her knees felt weak, and she leaned against the desk to keep from falling. The sound of his voice kept going, colder with every word. Her silence has been useful. Her routine perfect, no one suspects her. But if she remembers the mission, if she connects the signal, we end it quietly. No witnesses. Mara stopped breathing for a moment. The air seemed to disappear from the room. Her mind tried to understand the words, but they crashed together like broken glass. She didn't know whether to run or scream. She stood there shaking as the voice went on, each sentence slicing into her calm life, turning it upside down. She turned off the recorder and stepped back, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. Everything she thought she knew about her quiet job, her silent days, her simple life, all of it was breaking apart. She realized the judge was not just a man of law. He was part of something darker, something she had once been part of too, even if she couldn't remember how outside. Lightning flashed across the sky and thunder followed close behind. The light spilled into the office for a moment, and in that flash, she saw something on the shelf she had never noticed before. A small silver frame turned backward. She reached for it slowly, her fingers cold when she turned it around, her breath caught in her throat. It was a photo of her brother standing beside the judge, both wearing military uniforms, both smiling like men who shared secrets. The room seemed to spin around her. Her brother and the judge together. It made no sense. The last time she saw her brother was 10 years ago, before he disappeared. Before she got that message, before everything changed, and now here he was smiling with the man who controlled her life. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She ran to her desk, grabbed her coat, and rushed out of the courthouse, her footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The rain hit her face as she stepped outside, the cold air burning her lungs. She walked fast through the wet streets, her shoes splashing in puddles, her mind running faster than her feet, questions hitting her one after another. Why was her brother with the judge? What was Echo 47? What was she forgetting when she reached her small apartment? She locked the door and turned off every light. She sat on the floor with her back against the wall, her phone still in her hand, the screen dark, her reflection faint in the glass. She opened her messages again, hoping for another clue. Another message, but there was nothing new. Only the same words waiting like a heartbeat. Coulson Echo 47. Do not ignore. She began searching through her old things again. The same box she had opened before. Pictures, letters, a few broken pieces of memory. She found a folded piece of paper she hadn't noticed earlier. On it were 3 words written in her brother's handwriting. Trust no one. And under it, a strange symbol that looked like 2 wings crossed together. Her phone buzzed suddenly, making her jump. A new message appeared, this time shorter, colder, clearer. They know you listened. She stared at the screen in disbelief, fear crawling up her spine. Her eyes darted toward the window where rain streaked down like tears. Someone was watching her, she could feel it. She stood slowly and turned off her phone, her breathing shallow, her body trembling with fear and confusion. In the dark silence of her apartment, she whispered to herself that she needed to leave. She needed to find out who sent the message and what the judge had done to her. But most of all, she needed to know if her brother was still alive. Outside, the thunder roared again, and Mara Ellis knew the quiet life she once had was gone forever, replaced by a truth that was waiting in the shadows to be found. Mara Ellis woke up to the sound of heavy rain tapping on her window, the kind of sound that felt endless and cold. Her eyes opened slowly as if her body was afraid to face another day. For a moment, she did not remember where she was or what had happened. But then the memories from last night rushed back like a wave too strong to fight. The recording, the judge's voice, the message, and her brother's face in that photograph. Everything came back at once and her chest ached with fear and confusion. Her small apartment looked darker than usual. The light from the street barely touched the walls. Her phone was still lying on the floor where she dropped it the night before. She picked it up carefully, half expecting another message. But the screen was silent, no sound, no vibration. Only the quiet reminder of what she had read before. They know you listened. The words echoed in her mind again and again until they became a whisper that followed her through the room. She stood up and walked to the window. Her fingers brushed against the cold glass. The world outside looked washed away by the rain. Cars passing slowly. People hidden under umbrellas. But somewhere out there someone was watching her. She could feel it in her bones. She pulled the curtain closed and turned away, her breath shaky. Her heart still racing like it was trapped in a cage. The box of old memories sat open on the table, its contents spread out in messy piles. She picked up the photo of her brother again, his smile bright and real, his eyes full of life. She remembered how he used to call her Echo when they were kids. It was a nickname, a joke between them because she always repeated what he said. But now that word felt heavy, dangerous. It was no longer just a name. It was a code that had followed her for 10 long years. Her mind kept asking the same question. Why would the judge have that picture? What did her brother have to do with him? And what did the call sign really mean? She knew she couldn't stay here anymore. Not when someone might come for her. She packed a small bag with only what she needed. Some cash, her phone, and the box of memories. Then she left her apartment through the back stairs, hoping no one would notice. The streets were wet and almost empty. She walked fast, her eyes scanning every corner, every car, every reflection in the glass door she passed. She reached the old cafe across from the courthouse. It was one of the few places she used to go to during her lunch breaks. The owner, Mrs. Lorna, looked up and smiled faintly. "You look pale, dear." "Are you all right?" she asked, and Mara forced a small smile in return. "Just tired," she whispered. Taking a seat near the back, she ordered tea but didn't drink it. She only stared at the steam curling up like smoke. Her phone buzzed again on the table. Her stomach tightened as she reached for it. Another message appeared. "You are not alone, Echo," she gasped softly, her hands trembling. The name Echo burned on the screen like fire. She typed back quickly, "Who are you?" But there was no reply, only silence. She left the cafe and walked toward the old bridge at the edge of the city, a place her brother used to take her when they were young, when they wanted to escape from the noise of the world. She stood there under the gray sky watching the river flow below, her reflection rippling in the water. She whispered softly, "If you are out there, please give me a sign." Her voice barely louder than the rain behind her. A car slowed down. The sound of tires on wet pavement made her turn quickly. A black sedan stopped a few feet away, its windows dark. Her body tensed. The door opened and for a moment she thought it was the judge. But the man who stepped out was younger, tall, wearing a dark coat, his eyes hidden by the shadow of his hood. He raised his hand slowly, showing her something small in silver. It was a badge, the same kind her brother used to carry, and on it she saw the number 47. Her breath caught. She took a step back, ready to run, but the man spoke quietly. "Mara, your brother sent me." His voice was calm but tired, like someone who had been hiding too long. She stared at him, trying to decide if she could trust him. Everything inside her screamed to be careful, yet the sight of that badge made her heart tremble with hope. She whispered, "He's alive," and the man nodded once. "Yes, but not for long if you stay here." She followed him to the car, her mind racing, her thoughts colliding like lightning. Inside the car, the air smelled of metal and rain. He drove without saying much, his eyes fixed on the road. After a few minutes, she asked quietly, "Who are you?" And he replied, "Someone who used to believe in the same mission your brother believed in before it was corrupted." His words were heavy with regret. She wanted to ask more, but something in his tone told her to wait. They drove to an old warehouse near the docks. The air was thick with fog and salt. The man parked the car and turned to her. "You need to see something," he said, leading her inside. The room was dark, except for a single lamp hanging from the ceiling. Under it was a table covered with papers, maps, and photographs. She stepped closer and saw her own face printed on one of the files. Under it were the words "Subject Echo 47, classified operation terminated." Her knees went weak again. She grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling. The man placed a hand on her shoulder and said softly, "They made you forget, but you were part of it too." And the judge made sure no one ever found out. His words echoed in the cold room like a warning, and Mara knew there was no going back. Her past was alive again, and it was coming for her. The rain had stopped, but the sky still looked heavy and gray. The air around the old warehouse felt thick with silence. Mara stood there staring at the file with her name on it, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold the paper. She wanted to cry, to scream, to ask 1,000 questions at once, but her voice would not come out. Her throat was dry like sand, and her heart kept pounding as if trying to escape her chest. The man beside her, the one who claimed to know her brother, watched her carefully, his dark eyes tired but alert. He said softly, "They used you, Mara. You were part of something you never agreed to. A project called Echo. It was meant to protect people, but it turned into something else, something dangerous." His words floated through the cold air, each one sharp like a knife. Mara tried to understand, to piece the puzzle together, but it felt too big, too broken. She touched the papers again, seeing more faces she didn't recognize, names and numbers, strange codes and symbols. And there in the middle of it all was Judge Roland Gray's photo, his cold expression exactly as she remembered. Under it was written, "Director Gray, Operation Overseer." Her breath caught in her throat. She whispered, "He runs it," and the man nodded slowly. "Yes, and he's looking for you now." The lights flickered suddenly. The man turned his head quickly, his expression changing. He moved toward the window and looked out through the cracks in the wall. His voice dropped low. "We have to go. They found us." Mara's stomach twisted with fear. She followed him to the back of the warehouse where an old door stood half open. The wind pushed against it, making a soft creak that sounded far too loud in the tense silence. They ran outside into the wet alley, the smell of the sea strong in the air. Footsteps echoed behind them, shadows moving fast. She could hear men shouting orders, their voices sharp and angry. The man grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a stack of wooden crates. "Stay quiet," he whispered. His hand pressed against her shoulder to keep her still. The sound of boots came closer. The beam of a flashlight swept across the ground, stopping just a few feet away. Mara held her breath, praying not to be seen. The men passed by, their voices fading into the distance. The man exhaled slowly and said, "We need to reach the docks." "There's a boat waiting." Mara nodded, her legs weak but determined. They moved through the narrow alleys until they reached the edge of the water. The fog had grown thicker, hiding everything except the dim glow of a few lights in the distance. He pointed ahead. "There, that's our way out," but before they could move, a voice called from behind them, calm and cold, "Going somewhere." "Miss Ellis." Mara froze. She knew that voice. She turned slowly and saw Judge Gray standing under a street lamp, his coat dark and wet from the rain, his eyes steady and sharp. Behind him stood 2 men in black suits, each holding a gun. The judge's expression was unreadable as he stepped closer. "I told you not to chase ghosts," he said, his tone quiet but heavy with threat. Mara took a step back, her pulse racing. The man beside her moved slightly in front of her as if to shield her. The judge smiled faintly, a smile that held no warmth. "You were never supposed to remember," he said. "Your brother wanted to protect you, but now you've ruined everything." The man beside her shouted, "She has the right to know the truth." And the judge's smile faded. "The truth is dangerous, and both of you are already in too deep." Without warning, one of the men raised his gun. A loud crack split the air. Mara screamed as the man beside her fell to his knees. Blood spreading across his shirt, she dropped down beside him, her hands trembling as she tried to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me," she whispered, her eyes wide with panic. He grabbed her wrist weakly and said, "Find your brother, he's still alive. Trust the signal." His voice broke as he spoke the last word, and then he went still, his hand slipping away from hers. Tears filled Mara's eyes, her body shaking with shock. The judge stepped forward slowly, his eyes cold as stone. "You can come with me quietly," he said, "or you can end like him." She backed away, her mind spinning, her eyes darting around for a way out. And then she saw it. A small metal box half buried near the dock. An old radio transmitter. She remembered it from her brother's things. She lunged toward it, grabbed it, and pressed the power button. The device crackled weakly. Then a soft voice came through the static. Echo 47. Do you copy? The judge's eyes widened. Turn that off, he shouted, but it was too late. Mara pressed the side button and whispered into the mic. This is Echo 47. I need help. The line buzzed for a moment and then the same voice answered. Hold your position, we're coming. The judge's men moved toward her. Guns raised, she ran toward the edge of the dock, her feet slipping on the wet wood. She could hear the sound of engines in the distance. Boats cutting through the fog. The judge shouted again, his voice filled with anger. You don't know what you're doing. But Mara turned back and said in a shaking voice, I finally do. Then she jumped into the cold water below, the impact stealing her breath. The darkness closing around her as the world above filled with shouts and flashing lights. She surfaced a few feet away, gasping for air, pulling herself toward the shadows of a nearby boat. Voices shouted behind her, but she kept swimming, her body aching, her heart burning with grief and fear. As she climbed onto the deck, she heard the sound of a motor starting. Someone pulled her up, a figure in a dark coat, and whispered in her ear, You did well, Echo. We've been waiting for you. And before she could speak, the boat sped off into the fog, leaving the judge's voice echoing behind her. Fading into the night, the sea wind was cold and sharp, spraying salt across Mara's face as the boat cut through the dark water. Her clothes were soaked, her hands shaking, her heart still pounding from what had just happened. She could still hear the echo of the gunshot in her ears, the image of the man falling beside her, the way his voice faded when he said her brother was alive. All of it burned into her mind like fire that would not die. The man steering the boat said nothing at first, his face hidden under a dark hood. The only light came from the dim glow of the dashboard. The sound of the waves hitting the hull filled the silence between them. Finally, he spoke in a low, steady voice. You are safe for now, he said. But the judge will not stop. He has too much to lose, Mara swallowed hard, her voice rough from the cold air. Who are you? She asked, and he turned slightly, his face still shadowed. Someone who owes your brother his life, he said, and those words hit her like a spark in the dark. She stared at him, her eyes wide with hope and fear. You know where he is? She asked quickly. The man nodded once. Yes, but it's not safe to say here. The judge has ears everywhere. Mara gripped the edge of the seat, her knuckles white, her thoughts spinning. She had spent 10 years believing her brother was dead, 10 years living in silence, and now that silence was cracking open, revealing secrets she never imagined. The boat reached an isolated dock hidden behind tall rocks and broken wooden beams. They tied the ropes quietly and stepped onto the wet ground. The man led her through a narrow path lined with reeds and fog. The night air was thick and full of tension. Every sound seemed louder. Every shadow felt alive. Finally, they reached a small cabin half buried in the hill, its windows dark, its door slightly open. The man motioned for her to stay back and stepped inside first, checking the corners. Then he nodded. It's clear, he said, and she followed inside. The room was small and smelled of smoke and old wood. There was a single table with maps spread across it, wires running to a radio set on the wall. Mara looked around and saw something that made her heart stop. An old photograph of her and her brother taped beside the radio. Her voice broke as she whispered, he was here. And the man nodded. He built this place as a safe point before they turned on him. He walked to the radio, adjusted the knobs, and said quietly, We've been using his old signal to reach what's left of the Echo team. They are few but still fighting. Mara stood beside him, watching the red light blink on the transmitter. Why did they take my memories? She asked, her voice trembling. Why me? The man hesitated, then said, Because you were the one who found out what the judge was doing. You saw the truth. He couldn't risk you speaking, so he made you forget. Her eyes filled with tears, anger rising inside her like a storm. He used me, she whispered. He used my silence, the man nodded. Yes, and your brother tried to stop it. But they caught him before he could warn you, before Mara could respond. The radio crackled softly and a voice came through, faint and distorted but familiar. Echo 47, this is Falcon. Do you copy? Mara froze. Her breath catching, she stepped closer, her voice shaking as she said, Falcon, is that you? There was a pause, then the voice replied, Mara, thank God you're alive. Tears ran down her face as she whispered, I thought you were gone. he answered. I wanted you to believe that. It was the only way to keep you safe. But now the judge knows you remember, and that means he will come for you. The man beside her looked tense, his eyes fixed on the door. We need to move again, he said. But Mara could not stop listening. Her brother's voice filled her heart with both pain and hope. I can meet you, he said. There's a place. The signal tower on Ridge Hill tomorrow night. Come alone. It's the only way. Before she could answer, the line went dead, the radio light flickering out, silence falling heavy over the room. Mara turned to the man. I have to go, she said, and he shook his head. It's too dangerous. The judge will expect it, but she stepped closer, her eyes fierce for the first time. I have spent my whole life being quiet. I won't hide anymore. Her voice carried strength she didn't know she had, and after a long moment the man nodded. Then we prepare, he said. They spent the night checking maps and equipment. The rain started again outside, hitting the roof in steady rhythm. Mara couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her brother's face, the judge's cold smile, and the man who had died trying to protect her. By dawn she was ready, dressed in dark clothes, the radio device tucked into her jacket, her heart steady even though fear still whispered in her mind. As they stepped outside, the wind carried the smell of salt and smoke. The man handed her a small silver disc. If you're in danger, press this, he said. It will send your location to me. She nodded, her fingers closing around it tightly. They walked together until the path split into two. He looked at her one last time and said, Remember, not everyone who smiles is a friend. She nodded again and walked into the fog, her steps silent but sure. Behind her, the waves crashed against the rocks, and far away in the distance, hidden under the gray sky, Judge Gray stood by his car watching the horizon. His eyes cold and knowing, he turned to his men and said quietly, She's going to Ridge Hill, make sure she never reaches it. And as the car drove away, Mara kept walking through the mist, unaware that the hunt had already begun, and that the truth waiting at Ridge Hill would change everything. The night at Ridge Hill was cold and wild. The wind howled through the trees and the sky hung low and gray. Mara climbed the rocky path with her hood pulled up and her hands tight around the small radio in her pocket. Her breath came out in short clouds as she moved higher. Every sound around her made her heart jump. She could feel eyes watching her from the darkness, but she kept going. She had come too far to turn back now. The tower stood tall at the top of the hill, its old metal frame creaking in the wind. Broken wires hung like vines, and the red light at its peak blinked slowly through the fog. It looked like a heartbeat in the night. Steady and strange, Mara stopped for a moment, looking at it with both fear and hope. She whispered softly to herself, Please be there. Please be real. Her voice trembling in the cold air as she reached the base of the tower. She heard movement behind her, the crunch of boots on gravel. She spun around quickly, her eyes wide. A shadow stepped out from the fog and her heart nearly stopped. It was her brother, older, thinner, but alive. His eyes tired yet warm. He said her name softly, Mara. And she ran to him, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, I thought I lost you. He held her close for a moment, his voice shaking as he said, I wanted to come back, but I couldn't. They would have killed you. They stood together under the tower, the wind tugging at their clothes, both silent for a moment, letting the years of pain settle between them. Finally, Mara pulled back and asked, What happened? Why did the judge do this? Why did he use me? Her brother sighed, his eyes dark with memories he didn't want to relive. He was part of a secret program. They called it Operation Echo. They trained people to erase memories, to control the truth. You worked with me once. We wanted to expose it. But when he found out, he erased your mind and made you believe you were just a quiet clerk. Mara felt her knees go weak. She leaned against the cold metal of the tower, her mind spinning. He turned me into someone else, she whispered. Her brother nodded. Yes, but your silence saved you. It made him believe you were harmless. He took her hand gently. But now he knows you remember and he's coming, as if on cue. Headlights appeared far down the hill, slicing through the fog like knives, black cars moving fast toward the tower. Her brother's grip tightened. We have to send the proof now, he said, pulling a small device from his coat. This holds every file, every secret, everything he's done. He connected it to the old radio wires. Sparks flickered as the machine powered up. Mara watched as he typed in commands, the red light flashing faster. Once this transmits, the world will know, he said. But then a gunshot cracked through the air. Mara screamed as her brother fell to one knee. Clutching his arm, the sound echoed off the metal. She turned and saw Judge Gray standing by the cars. His coat blowing in the wind, his face calm, his eyes sharp as ice. "You should have stayed silent," he called out, walking slowly toward them. "You were perfect when you didn't speak, but you couldn't leave the past alone." His voice was almost gentle, which made it worse. Her brother struggled to stand, raising the small transmitter toward the tower. The judge raised his gun again, but before he could fire, Mara stepped in front of her brother, her voice breaking but strong. "You took everything from me, my memory, my voice, my life, but you forgot one thing. Silence does not mean weakness." The judge's expression flickered for a second, a hint of surprise, but then he aimed again. Mara reached into her pocket, pulling out the radio she had carried since the docks. She pressed the side button hard. The device buzzed, and then a voice came through the static. "Echo 47, awaiting command." Her eyes locked on the judge, her voice steady and clear. "Code release," she said. The signal burst from the radio loud and sharp. The red light on the tower flared like lightning, the files from the transmitter shooting into the open network, spreading across every connected channel in seconds. The judge shouted, "No," running toward them, but it was too late. Alarms blared from the cars behind him, the sound of sirens rising in the distance. He turned to run, but the fog was filled with blue lights, vehicles surrounding the hill from every side. Mara stood tall as agents stepped out with weapons raised, their radios crackling with orders. "Target secured," they said, and Judge Gray dropped his gun, his face pale for the first time. Her brother sank to the ground, exhausted but alive. Mara knelt beside him, her hands shaking. "It's over," she whispered, and he smiled weakly. "You finished what I started." She held his hand tight, the sound of the wind mixing with the voices around them, the tower light still flashing above like a beacon of truth cutting through the fog later. As dawn touched the sky with pale light, Mara stood at the edge of the hill looking at the horizon. The air smelled of rain and metal, the world below slowly waking. Her brother sat nearby, his arm bandaged, resting quietly. She took a deep breath, her eyes clear, the silence around her no longer heavy, but peaceful. The agents had taken the judge away. The truth had spread through every channel, every screen, every network, his empire of control broken by the one woman he thought he could silence. Mara turned the small radio in her hands. The word Echo engraved on the side now felt different, no longer a burden but a sign of strength. Her brother called softly, "What will you do now?" and she smiled faintly. "I think I'll start speaking," she said, her voice gentle but strong. The wind carried her words across the hill. As the light grew brighter, the fog began to fade, and the quiet woman who had once been forgotten finally stood free. Her call sign had changed everything.